In the spring of 1942, Japanese Imperial Army ordnance engineers at the Tokyo Arsenal received a captured M1 Garand rifle for formal evaluation.
They had pulled it from a battlefield in the Philippines, where American resistance had collapsed under the weight of a failed defensive campaign, and now they were holding the weapon that General George Patton would later call the greatest battle implement ever devised. The engineers stripped it, tested it, cycled it. They studied its gas-operated mechanism, its en-bloc clip system, its 8-round semi-automatic action. And when their evaluation was complete, their official assessment was unambiguous. The M1 Garand was mechanically overcomplicated, logistically wasteful, and tactically unsound. One engineer's report noted specifically that the weapon's clip ejection mechanism, which flung an empty metal clip from the receiver with a sharp audible ping when the last round was fired, was a fundamental flaw. In a disciplined combat environment, that sound would telegraph the moment a soldier was empty.
It was, in their professional judgment, a design failure dressed up as an innovation. They returned to their Arisaka Type 99 bolt-action rifles with confidence. They were right about the ping. They were catastrophically wrong about everything else.
By September 15, 1944, the date U.S. Marines of the 1st Marine Division landed on the island of Peleliu in the Western Pacific, the M1 Garand had been tested across 2 years of brutal jungle combat in Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, and Guam.
Those engineers in Tokyo had evaluated a weapon in laboratory. The Marines carried it into a place that no laboratory could simulate. What happened on Peleliu over the following 73 days would settle the debate permanently, not through doctrine or design philosophy, but through the irreducible mathematics of who was still standing when the shooting stopped. The Japanese assessment of the M1 Garand was not irrational. It came from a coherent military philosophy built on decades of tactical doctrine and genuine combat experience. To understand why they dismissed the weapon, you have to understand what they valued and why those values made complete sense within their own system. The Imperial Japanese Army had built its infantry doctrine around the bolt-action rifle as a precision instrument. The Arisaka Type 38 and its successor, the Type 99, were among the most reliable bolt-action designs of the war. The Type 99 chambered a 7.7mm round with genuine long-range accuracy, excellent penetration against light cover, and legendary mechanical reliability, even under tropical humidity, mud, and sand.
Japanese infantry were trained to make every round count. Ammunition resupply in Pacific Island campaigns was difficult and unpredictable. The discipline of deliberate fire, one aimed shot at a time, was not just a preference, it was a logistical necessity. From that framework, the M1 Garand looked genuinely problematic. The semi-automatic mechanism meant a soldier could empty an 8-round clip in under 9 seconds of sustained fire. That rate of consumption was 3 times higher than a bolt action in trained hands. The gas-operated system had more moving parts than a bolt action, which meant more potential failure points. The weapon weighed 4.37 kilograms unloaded, heavier than the Type 99. And yes, there was the ping, the metallic ejection sound that announced to any nearby enemy that a soldier had just fired his last shot. Japanese engineers were measuring the M1 Garand against a set of criteria that were entirely legitimate for the kind of war they had prepared to fight. Deliberate, aimed, disciplined fire at range. Ammunition conservation under resupply constraints. Mechanical simplicity for field maintenance. Against those criteria, the Garand was excessive, noisy, and hungry. But here is the thing they could not see from inside the Tokyo Arsenal in 1942. The Pacific War was not going to be fought at range. It was going to be fought at 10 meters. Peleliu is a coral island roughly 10 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide, located in the Palau archipelago at the southwestern edge of the Caroline Islands.
In September 1944, it was defended by approximately 10,900 soldiers of the Japanese 14th Division under Lieutenant General Sadae Inoue, supported by an additional 1,500 naval personnel.
The island had been fortified with extraordinary thoroughness. Over 500 interconnected caves, tunnels, and reinforced bunkers had been carved into the Umabrobel mountain ridge that dominated the island's center.
Coral-reinforced concrete, steel blast doors, interlocking fields of fire designed so that destroying one position exposes attackers to fire from 3 others. The 1st Marine Division, under Major General William Rupertus, was told the island would fall in 4 days. Rupertus famously told his Marines it would be a hard fight but a fast one. He was right about the first word.
On the morning of September 15th, the Marines came ashore on a 900-meter beach frontage under one of the most intensive Japanese defensive fires of the entire Pacific campaign. Within the first hour, 210 Marines were killed or wounded.
The temperature on the beach reached 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The coral rock absorbed and radiated heat like a kiln. Water ran out within hours, and the Marines pushed inland with their M1 Garands into terrain designed specifically to negate American firepower advantages. The Umerbrogel Pocket, the Marines called it Bloody Nose Ridge, was where the M1 Garand's hidden logic became visible. A Japanese defensive position in the Umerbrogel was typically a cave mouth or a reinforced bunker with a narrow firing slit, connected by tunnel to at least 2 other positions. To assault one required approaching through exposed coral ground under fire, reaching the position, suppressing or eliminating its occupants, and doing it all quickly enough so that reinforcements from the connected tunnel network could not counterattack before you controlled the entrance. The average assault on a prepared Japanese position at Peleliu happened at a distance of 15 to 40 meters, sometimes less. At that distance, the Type 99's long-range accuracy was irrelevant. Its 5-round bolt-action capacity meant 5 shots before a manual cycling pause. Against a semi-automatic that delivered 8 rounds without any mechanical interruption between trigger pulls, the arithmetic of close-quarters assault became brutally simple. Here is the specific mechanism of that arithmetic. When a Marine moved on a bunker at Peleliu, his window of suppressive fire, the time during which he could keep enemy heads down and move forward simultaneously, was entirely determined by how many rounds he could deliver without stopping to cycle a bolt. A bolt action required the shooter to lift the bolt handle, pull it back, push it forward, and push it down between every shot. Each cycle takes a trained soldier approximately 0.8 to 1.2 seconds under ideal conditions. Under combat stress, coral cover, and heat, that cycle time lengthened. Each cycle was a moment of interrupted fire during which the target could raise his head, shift position, or acquire the attacker. The M1 Garand had no such pause. The semi-automatic gas mechanism cycled the action automatically with every shot. The Marine pulled the trigger 8 times.
8 rounds left the barrel in under 9 seconds, all aimed, none requiring any manual cycling. When the en-bloc clip ejected with its notorious ping, he had already moved the muzzle to the next threat. Let me show you what this meant on September 19th, 1944, 4 days into the Peleliu campaign. Corporal Louis Bauzel of Company C, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, was moving with his squad through the Umerbrogel approaches when his unit came under fire from a series of 3 connected fighting positions, a cluster of fortified bunkers tied together by a shallow trench network and covered by interlocking fire from a cave entrance above.
His squad was pinned. The positions were close, within 25 meters of their cover. Waiting for supporting fire or mortar support was not an option. The terrain was too broken, the positions too integrated into the natural coral formations for indirect fire to be effective without risking the squad itself.
Bauzel moved. He advanced on the first position, using a Garand loaded to its full 8 rounds, and assaulted under his own suppressive fire. The semi-automatic mechanism allowed him to keep rounds on the position continuously as he closed the distance.
He reached the first bunker, silenced it, and continued to the second without pausing to reload. The 8-round capacity was not a luxury. It was exactly enough to bridge the distance between cover and contact across all 3 positions in a single sustained action. Corporal Louis Bauzel was killed in that action. He was 20 years old. He received the Medal of Honor posthumously, the citation noting his daring assault on the enemy positions. What the citation did not calculate, but what the engagement geometry makes clear, is that a bolt-action rifle would have required him to stop and cycle his action at least 3 times during that assault, each time breaking the suppressive fire that was the only thing keeping him alive during the approach. The ping that Japanese engineers identified as a tactical flaw was real. There are documented accounts of Japanese soldiers listening for the Garand's ejection sound as a tactical cue. But the tactical reality of the Pacific eliminated the threat of that flaw through a different mechanism. At the ranges where Peleliu was fought, by the time an enemy heard the ping, the Marine was already on top of him. The warning was genuine. The time it provided was not. Now let us do the comparison that Tokyo's ordnance engineers did not perform, not the laboratory test, the operational one. Effective rate of fire, which is the measure that actually determines assault dynamics. The Arisaka Type 99 in trained hands delivered 12 to 15 aimed rounds per minute. That is the bolt action ceiling under combat conditions, accounting for bolt cycling time and the shooter's need to reacquire sight alignment after each manual cycle. The M1 Garand delivered 40 to 45 aimed rounds per minute in semi-automatic fire. The difference is not marginal. It is a 3-to-1 advantage in suppressive capacity. Now apply that differential to assault geometry. An attacker moving at a standard infantry advance covers approximately 3 to 4 meters per second in a short rush across open ground. A 25-meter approach takes roughly 7 to 8 seconds. During those 8 seconds, a bolt-action defender can deliver 2 shots with confidence, and perhaps 3 under extreme pressure. A semi-automatic defender delivers 5 to 6, but the Marine is the attacker, and he needs to deliver enough fire to suppress the position during his own advance. With a bolt action, 2 shots across an 8-second approach provide fragile suppression at best. With 8 rounds available without cycling, the attacker can deliver continuous suppressive fire from the moment he breaks cover to the moment he reaches the objective. This is the core of the hidden logic that Tokyo missed. The M1 Garand was not designed to outshoot the Arisaka at 400 meters. It was designed to dominate the assault geometry at 25 meters, and that is where the Pacific War was decided. Move to ammunition consumption, the Japanese engineers' primary critique. They were correct that the Garand's semi-automatic action encouraged higher consumption rates. A Marine with a Garand and the Brogel could empty an 8-round clip in under 9 seconds of sustained fire. That consumption rate, multiplied across a Marine platoon of 40 rifles, generates approximately 320 rounds downrange in one sustained burst. That is not waste. That is suppression on an industrial scale. The tactical purpose of that ammunition consumption was to keep every head in every connected position down simultaneously, preventing the tunnel network from repositioning defenders during an assault. The Arisaka's conservation discipline, which was a genuine virtue in long-range attrition warfare, became a critical vulnerability in assault operations against integrated defensive networks. Now, address the mechanical reliability comparison. Japanese critics noted the Garand's greater mechanical complexity. The gas-operating bolt had more parts than the Arisaka's Mauser-derived bolt mechanism. In theory, more parts meant more failure points. But the M1 Garand's gas system operated under a consistent pressure envelope that made it highly tolerant of the fouling, moisture, and debris characteristic of Pacific jungle and coral terrain. The Springfield Armory's testing protocols required the Garand to function after immersion in saltwater, after being buried in sand, and after 20,000 rounds of sustained fire without lubrication. It passed all 3. U.S. Army and Marine Corps maintenance records from the Pacific Campaign consistently show M1 Garand malfunction rates below 0.3% under sustained combat conditions. The Arisaka Type 99 was also reliable. This is not a case where enemy equipment was simply inferior. The Type 99 was an excellent bolt-action rifle. But excellent bolt-action and what this war required turned out to be different categories. The industrial scale behind the Garand made that difference permanent. Springfield Armory, Winchester Repeating Arms, and additional contract manufacturers produced 5,468,272 M1 Garands during the war. To put that number in operational terms, the United States manufactured more M1 Garands than Japan produced all rifles of all types combined during the entire conflict. Japan's total small arms production across all manufacturers between 1941 and 1945 reached approximately 3,100,000 rifles, including the Type 38, the Type 99, and all carbine variants combined. The production differential was not incidental. It reflected a fundamental difference in industrial philosophy. American weapons designers at Springfield Armory had specifically engineered the Garand for mass production. John Garand spent 18 years refining his design, and a critical portion of that time was spent eliminating manufacturing complications. The en-bloc clip system that Japanese engineers found operationally problematic was partly chosen because it was faster to manufacture than alternatives. The receiver design was optimized for machining tolerances achievable on standard American machine tools. Every design choice that made the Garand look mechanically excessive to a craftsman's eye made it faster to produce in a factory. Japan's weapons production philosophy remained anchored in craft industrial traditions that valued individual component quality over production velocity. This was not ignorance.
It was a coherent industrial culture applied to a context where production velocity, not component perfection, would determine the outcome. By October 1944, when the Peleliu campaign formally concluded after 73 days of combat, the 1st Marine Division had suffered 6,526 casualties, including 1,252 killed in action.
It was one of the costliest per capita engagements in Marine Corps history. The Japanese 14th Division suffered an almost total annihilation. Of the estimated 10,900 defenders, fewer than 300 survived the campaign. Some continued fighting in the caves until 1947, when the last confirmed Japanese holdout, Corporal Shoichi Yokoi, emerged, having never received official word of Japan's surrender. The cave that was his world for 27 years had been built to outlast the American rifles. The rifles outlasted the Empire. In 1945, captured Japanese weapons evaluation documents from late in the war were analyzed by U.S. Army intelligence teams. Among them were revised assessments of American infantry weapons written after the Mariana Islands campaign of 1944, in which Japanese infantry had faced Garand-equipped Marines and Army units in sustained close-quarters combat across Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. The revised assessment of the M1 Garand was notably different in tone from the 1942 Tokyo Arsenal evaluation.
Lieutenant General Masaharu Homa, who had commanded Japanese forces in the Philippines in 1942 and was later captured and tried for war crimes, spoke during post-war interrogations about the tactical shock experienced by Japanese infantry when they encountered Marines with semi-automatic rifles in sustained assault operations. He specifically noted that the volume of fire delivered by American units in close-quarters assault exceeded anything that Japanese doctrine or training had prepared their soldiers to counter. His staff had discussed the problem as early as 1943. They had no solution. General Hideki Tojo's own post-war statements, delivered during the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal proceedings, included a broader acknowledgement that Japan had fundamentally misjudged American industrial capacity and the weapons production philosophy that expressed it. He did not single out the M1 Garand by name, but the weapon's 5.4 million units of production was a specific, concrete expression of the industrial reality he was describing. The most specific documented acknowledgement came from Japanese infantry unit after-action reports recovered from Saipan and Iwo Jima, analyzed by the Marine Corps Intelligence Section in 1945. Multiple reports described the psychological effect of facing semi-automatic fire in bunker assault operations. One report, translated by the Intelligence Section and preserved in the National Archives, described American infantry assault tactics as creating a continuous wall of fire that made defensive repositioning during an assault effectively impossible. The report recommended that future defensive construction prioritize deeper tunneling and more steel blast doors to compensate for the fire volume. The solution to the Garand's assault capacity was to build better hiding places. The engineers who evaluated the M1 Garand in Tokyo in 1942 were not wrong about what they measured. The ping was real. The ammunition consumption was real. The mechanical complexity was real, at least relative to a bolt action. They applied genuine expertise to a genuine problem and reached a coherent conclusion.
What they could not measure was the war they were about to fight. They'd evaluated a semi-automatic rifle against the criteria of an attrition war fought at 400 meters with reliable resupply and time to breathe between shots. The Pacific gave them instead a close-quarters war fought at 25 meters in 115-degree heat inside coral fortresses with no room between positions for a bolt handle to travel. The M1 Garand was not the greatest battle implement ever devised because it was the most accurate, the most mechanically elegant, or the most ammunition efficient. It was the greatest battle implement because John Garand and the engineers at Springfield Armory had asked a different question than the Tokyo Arsenal asked. Not what is the best rifle for a disciplined marksman, but what is the best rifle for an industrial nation sending mass armies into close-quarters combat under conditions of total war? That question and the weapon it produced is the permanent historical verdict on the argument. There is a principle here that extends beyond the M1 Garand and beyond the Pacific War. Every system optimized for one set of conditions becomes a liability when the conditions change. The Arisaka Type 99 was optimized for the war Japan had won, the Russo-Japanese War, the Manchurian campaigns, the China Theater, a war of established doctrine, predictable ranges, and controllable logistics. The M1 Garand was designed for a war that did not yet fully exist when John Garand filed his patent in 1932. Total industrial warfare at close range against fortified positions, sustained across thousands of kilometers of ocean supply lines, executed by millions of soldiers who needed a weapon they could maintain in the field without armorer support. The Japanese engineers in 1942 were evaluating the answer to a question they had not yet been asked. By the time they understood the question, 5.4 million Garands were already in production. The ping they identified as a flaw became, in the coral caves of the Pacific, the sound of the last round before the war ended for the men inside. Here is the question I want to leave you with. The M1 Garand represents a case where the wrong weapon by conventional standards won decisively because the conventional standards were measuring the wrong thing. Where else in military history, or in any competitive domain, do you see this pattern? The technically inferior system winning because it was designed for a different and ultimately more decisive set of conditions. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every one of them, and the patterns people find across different domains are consistently the most interesting part of this conversation. If this changed how you think about weapons development, industrial philosophy, or the relationship between design assumptions and the wars they actually produce, hit that like button and subscribe. Every week, we find a story where the conventional account is missing the mechanism that actually matters. Thanks for watching.